How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bush Radical. Over the last 2 years, a lot of people have wanted to get more off-grid, get more out into the country, maybe do a little bit of hobby farming, maybe build a cabin in the woods. If you're gonna make that transition, one of the first things you might want to consider is a pickup truck. But if you're looking at trucks that were made in the last 20 years, the prices right now are the highest they've ever been in that market. So it makes a lot of sense to look at an older model truck, especially if you're gonna actually use it as a truck. Hauling animal feed, hauling hay, hauling firewood, hauling building supplies, especially in backcountry where the roads are pretty crappy. A good four-wheel drive truck is what you're gonna need. But if you're not a mechanic, how do you evaluate a pickup truck to make sure that you're getting a good deal and you're not just buying somebody else's problems and junk? Today on this video, I'm gonna walk you guys through what I do when I buy a used truck. All the things I look for and the way I evaluate it to make sure I'm buying something that's worth having and I'm getting a good deal. Stay tuned. Now what I like to do is I like to evaluate everything underneath the truck first. And I like to start right at the driver's front tire. You're going to want to check the tread of the tire, but not only that, the condition of the rubber itself. See the weather checking on the side? See the checking between the tread? Although this looks like a good tire from 10 feet away, once you get up to it and really start taking a look, you can see that it's an older tire. Look for the DOT date code on the tire. It could be on either the outside or the inside sidewall. It's a 4-digit code and it looks just like this. Looking at this code, I can tell that this tire was made the 39th week of 2003. It might not have been used much and it might still have a lot of tread left, but it's got a lot of age. No, this is a four-wheel drive truck, and if it has lockout hubs, you're going to want to make sure that both of those lockout hubs move freely and do what they're supposed to. Now we want to take a look at the shock, the spring, and the shock tower. The shock tower has a whole lot of scale rust on it, but it appears to be fairly solid. I don't think anybody's power washed this thing in ages, that's for sure. You can see how rusty that shock mount is. Now this is an upper Midwest truck, so of course what we're looking for is irreparable rust damage. The most important thing on any one of these older trucks is the frame itself. Frame rot is your major concern. Even on newer trucks, there's a lot of problems with frame rot. While you're underneath there looking at the frame, also look at the floor from the underside. And of course, we're looking for rot there too. You can see right here, there's a body plug that's missing. Salt and dirt and junk gets up in there and it'll rust out right there. So we're gonna want to do something about this. This body panel right here in the extended cab area, that's rusted out pretty bad. This rust over the fender well, that's pretty common. This tire is the same brand that's on the front. It's probably from the same batch. It's probably the same age. Rust is one thing. Holes, welds, repairs, that's another thing. Now at the end of the leaf spring, you have this spring hanger. These things will rot out on you. This one, all the paint and stuff is peeling off, all the coating that was on there at some point. You're going to want to get your hand right up in here, and you're going to want to feel if there's any holes in this spring hanger. Take a look at this rear spring hanger. This thing is gone. That's ready to fail pretty much any time. I want to take a look at this rear shock. Whether it functions or not, it's in horrible condition. It's got pieces that are falling off the sleeve. It's in terrible condition and that needs to be noted. While you're in this area too, take a look at the gas tank straps. This forward tank has one strap that's in good condition and one strap that needs to be replaced. Here's that rear gas tank. I'm not seeing any leaks. The straps are pretty rusty. And speaking of gas tanks, we want to check each one of these fill doors, make sure that there's a gas cap on the filler tube. Now we're going to take a look at the tailgate. We're going to see what condition it's in, if it's bent up, how it functions, if it's missing any parts, if anything's broken. You can see this hanger strap's broken. You can see that the taillight lens back here is broken. Passenger side lens cover looks like it's in good shape. Notice the sag in the middle of the tailgate. There's a little more body rust in that bed corner to note. The tailgate hinges look like they're in pretty decent shape. Not only do you want to make sure the tailgate opens, you also want to make sure it closes. Take a look at the bed. Looks like it's pretty solid. One of the places a pickup is likely to rot out is right over top of the wheel wells, and these ones look pretty good. Moving on to the passenger side of the truck, we see the same issue. We've got the rust over the back wheel well. We've got the rust on this extended cab body panel. The rest of the truck looks pretty straight. This rear spring hanger is ugly, but it's in decent shape. Tailpipe looks good. We have the same type of tire over here. This shock's ugly too. Here's that front spring hanger. This one's not in bad condition. Of course, the most important reason why we're down here is we want to take a look at this frame. We want to make sure that there's no spots on this frame that are welded. Want to make sure there's no holes that aren't factory, that aren't supposed to be there. We also want to look up underneath the cab itself. See how bad the rust is, where it starts, where it stops, that sort of thing. I've seen a lot worse. Here's one of the cab mounts. This is the rubber mount where the cab mounts to the frame. We want to make sure that all of the mounts, the bed mounts, the cab mounts, the front clip mounts, we want to make sure that they're all good. Take a look at the corner of this fender. It's in fantastic condition for an old rusty Midwest truck. Pretty substantial dent in that extended cab portion. You can see the lockout hub on this side is a different brand, but it works fine. We're going to want to take a look at our sway bar bushings. We're going to want to take a look at our tie rod ends. Best thing you can do with these parts is just grab them and give them a good shake. Make sure they're good and tight. The steering linkage here in the front all looks like it's in fairly good condition. While you're up here, you want to look for moisture anywhere on the inside of these wheels. Could indicate that there's a brake line leak or a brake caliper leak. That wheel is actually missing a dust cover that's supposed to be there. The grill's in good shape, and both of the headlights, of course, are clouded like all these Ford headlights are. Windshield wipers, of course, are junk. Not only that, but if you look real close, you can see this. There's like a little rainbow mark here where that windshield wiper has been dragging dirt across this windshield. You want to take a look at the front of that engine. Look for any major oil leaks. Take a look at the oil pan on the motor. Look at the back end of the engine where it bolts onto the transmission. You can see some seepage there. Look at the transmission. Check for any major leaks. Seepage is one thing, leaks are another. What about the transfer case? You don't want to see any major leak. We want to take a look at the bottom of the gas tank for leaks. Of course, you want to look at the rear differential for leaks. A leak like this where there's actual oil coming out, it's going to make me very curious of what the level is in this rear differential.
Time to check the doors.
What you're looking for is you're looking for the door to sag. You're looking for the way that the door fits in the door opening, the way it's hung. Pull on the body panels of the door. You want to make sure that that door skin is on there nice and tight. Does the window work? Works like a charm. You're going to want to pull up on that door and check that hinge. Make sure the hinge isn't sloppy. The bushings in that hinge aren't wore out. Now let's check the driver's side.
You can tell the hinge pin bushings are wore out in the driver's side door.
Keep an eye on those body lines as that door is open. Quite a lot of play in this one. Now that we're done with that first lap around the truck, what do we know? We know the tires are 19 years old. That's a big problem. We know that the frame is good. We know there's one spring hanger that needs to be changed. We know that the bed mounts look okay. We know the cab mounts look okay. We know that all the steering linkages, they look pretty tight. And checking the drivetrain from the front to the back, we see seepage at the front of the engine. We see a little leak at the back of the engine. No leaks at the back of the transmission. No leaks at the front of the rear differential. But you do see a leak around the bottom of the rear differential. And that is a ton of information. We know all four shocks are probably original. They need to go. One of the taillight housings has some damage on it. One of the straps that holds the tailgate is busted. That's going to need to be replaced. The passenger door is in good condition. Its hinges are in good condition. We know the driver's door is going to need new bushings in it. It has 2 fuel tanks. We know that it has both of the gas caps that go on the fill tubes. We know that the front gas tank has a rusted through strap. That's going to need to be replaced.
Now let's check how the lights work.
First thing to do is to make sure that the light switch knob doesn't fall off. We can see that the headlights work, rear tail light works, and the other rear tail light works. Kick on dims. Both of the headlight dims work. You can see that condensation in that headlight lens. Kick on a turn signal, no left turn signal. Kick on the right, no right turn signal either. Let's check our brake lights.
Well, one of the brake lights works.
Now let's talk about price deductions. I'm looking for problems with the truck that aren't listed in the ad. If the ad says it needs new tires, I'm not going to get there and say, hey, your tires are junk. I'm not going to pay you the price because of the tires. That stuff's already been covered. I'm looking for stuff that is wrong but isn't listed. While we're checking lights, let's make sure our hazards work. One hazard light's working and one in the front's working. Right down there is the rear view mirror, which is supposed to be attached to the windshield. That's a problem. Seat's in poor condition.
Once you're in the truck, the name of the game is move everything. Everything that moves, move it through its range of motion. Make sure it works correctly. Glove box, radios, dials, you name it.
15 or 20.
Radio works.
With that
Glove box opens, glove box light comes on. Time to grab your knobs too. That one's good and tight. Oh, yep, that one comes off. I could tell it would because it would wiggle just a fuzz. That'll scare you if you're not ready for it. About the old ashtray. Yep, the ashtray works. Usually you'll see these older trucks like this, the ceiling will be falling down. The cloth will have lost its contact with the foam behind it. This one's doing all right. That looks like a bad connection. There we go. How about the other one? Yup. Now for the important stuff. Now we're going to look through the engine compartment. But if you don't know what to look for, how do you know what to look for? I'm going to break this down very simply. We're going to start with fluids. Any container in the engine compartment that holds fluids, we're going to want to take a look at it. We're going to check the engine oil at the dipstick. We're going to check the oil at the fill cap. We're going to check the radiator. We're going to check the power steering fluid. Now all of these fluids are going to tell a story. We're going to be able to get a ton of information just from looking where the fluid goes, seeing how much is there and what it looks like. For starters, let's take a look at our brake master cylinder. First thing you notice, there's hardly any brake fluid in it. That's a problem. The fact that the reservoir on the master cylinder is almost empty, we know there's a broken brake line somewhere. We're gonna have to find that. Now up here in the engine compartment, one of the most important tools that you can bring with you is a headlamp. Here's the reservoir. This should be washer fluid. You can see there's something in there. It looks like it might be partially frozen. Let's check the coolant overflow. Wow, that's empty. And it's just corroded down there too. Power steering fluid is low. See, there's some wet, oily residue around the power steering fill tube. Let's take the radiator cap off. Now you'll notice we never even bothered to start this truck, because what's the point in starting the truck and hearing it run and thinking everything is great if all this other stuff isn't great? There's the coolant down in there. It's pretty gross, but I've seen a lot worse. Now right here's the radiator. We're going to kind of come in and we're going to take a look at the side of that radiator. This metal crimp on this radiator. A lot of these Ford radiators will seep, and over time they're just going to lose fluid. You can see this has some corrosion on it. And if we look down here, there's a pan underneath the bottom of the radiator. That tray underneath the radiator is wet. There's probably a seep in this radiator. We're going to note that. Oil is pretty black. Find the oil fill cap. You're going to want to look underneath of it. If underneath that oil cap it looked all milky and cloudy and like a chocolate shake underneath there, it's because the rings are bad. There's none on this one. So the oil in this motor is filthy. That's disappointing. But on the other hand, if you check the oil in a truck that you're looking to buy and it's brand new, odds are somebody changed it so you think that they take better care of their motor than they do. Let's take a look at the condition of this serpentine belt, and we can see that this belt is very cracked. It's not in the worst shape I've ever seen, but I would change this. After fluids, we just want to look at every hose. Look at the connections. You can tell if one's been disconnected and then reconnected. Notice this fitting? We're looking for condition of hoses. We're looking for cracks. We're looking for abrasions. We're looking for splices that aren't factory. You're going to want to look for vacuum lines that go nowhere. You can see there's a vacuum line that doesn't go anywhere. There is another vacuum line right there, and it's been repaired with a chunk of rubber vacuum line. I'm going to guess that it goes right there. While we're looking at that, we'll just fix that so we know what we're dealing with.
Disconnected and broken vacuum lines are one of the most common causes of your check engine light coming on.
Another thing to look for, you can see right here, we have the original jack and the original tire iron. That's good to know. A lot of these older engines, this one included, it's got plenty of dirty, oily residue on it. None of these things are perfectly leak-proof. I'm seeing oily areas on the engine block, but I'm not seeing any active drips. There's no oil that's dripped out onto the snow, and this truck's been sitting here for a while. When we're looking at the battery here, you want to make sure that the battery is not moving around. You want to just grab that battery and wiggle it around. This little thing down here that's holding the battery in, that's not stock. I don't know who put that there, but that's not original. Now, an engine like this can look extremely complicated, but all you're doing is looking for very basic things. You're looking for broken vacuum lines. You're looking for missing vacuum fittings. You're looking for areas on the hoses that are abraded. Maybe there's fittings that you can see are cracked. Here's a good example right here. This vacuum line fitting is in poor condition. You want to look at every hose that you can get your hands onto. You want to make sure that the fittings and the elbows and stuff, that there's no cracks. You're looking for leaks. Another thing you're looking for parts that are newer. You can see way down there in the engine bay, that's a new starter. You can tell that that's a newer part. The one thing we do have to locate, and I think we've already found it, is we need to find out where there is a bad brake line. And this brake line right here is very wet. The axle shaft is wet around it. You can see that there's some brake fluid. The frame right here is wet. I think this little short brake line here is the culprit. Looks like it's probably failed, maybe right there by that connector.
You notice the vent hose for the axle's also disconnected.
Pretty sure that this is the failed brake line. That's why there's no brake fluid in the master cylinder. This is definitely something that needs to be addressed quickly, and it's also a good bargaining chip. This is an obvious deduction. So looking over this engine, what we found out that there's no major leaks. There's no major antifreeze leaks. There's seepage around the edges of the radiator. The coolant level is a little bit low. The overflow tank is dry. The battery is being held in there with kind of a homemade clamp. We know it needs one vacuum hose. That we know that we're going to have to top off the master cylinder. We know that we're going to have to replace a brake line. There's a lot of maintenance issues that I can tell have been neglected. But on the other hand, you're looking at a rig that hasn't seen a ton of use. It's got low enough miles. As long as the engine runs good and the truck drives down the road good, I think most everything else we've found can be dealt with. Let's start this thing up, see how it sounds. That's a totally cold start on that motor. So the motor, from sitting ice cold in the middle of winter, fires right up, it's running smooth, everything seems okay. Now this truck started cold, so I know that the battery is at least fairly decent. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this multimeter and I'm going to check to make sure the alternator's working. You're going to want to turn your meter on to volts DC, positive to positive, negative to negative. 14.4.
If you check your battery before startup and it reads something like 12.7, once you start the vehicle, if it's still reading 12.7, your alternator's not doing anything.
That's a properly functioning alternator. Now if you listen, you can hear that fuel pump running. The back tank is the one that's operating right now. This is a real good time to check that both tanks work. Yep, both fuel tanks are functioning just fine. How about the heat? Ooh. See that? Nothing, nothing. Works. Nothing, nothing, nothing.
If you have a blower motor that only works on high, it's the blower motor resistor. It runs the power through a couple different resistors, so you have a low speed, a medium speed, and a high speed on your fan.
If you get to the end and everything checks out and you're ready to take this vehicle for a drive, the first thing you're going to want to do is check to make sure the four-wheel drive works. If you have locking hubs like this truck, you're going to want to make sure both of those are in the lock position. Then you're going to want to make sure that the four-wheel drive shifter actually functions. Once the vehicle is running and in neutral, you're going to want to shift this shifter from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive. You're also going to want to push it down and pull it back into four low. Now what we're looking at here, this is the bottom of that four-wheel drive shifter lever. Quite often this will actually dry up, and inside of here there's a rod that you're supposed to be able to plunge down to move it back into four low. A lot of times this shifter is froze up. You'll be able to shift from two-wheel drive into four-wheel drive, but you won't be able to push down and shift it into four low. This would be the problem. If you can't get the truck to go into four-wheel drive, 9 times out of 10, that's the problem. If it's a four-wheel drive truck and it won't shift into four-wheel drive, you're going to want a deduction for that, especially if that wasn't listed in the ad. Another quick tip, nothing in this video that I've pointed out is going to do you any good if you forget about it. So make yourself a list before you go to look at a truck. Well, there you have it. That's the procedure that I go through when I buy a new used truck. Looking around the vehicle with just a piece of cardboard and a headlamp, you can figure out a lot of the things that you need to know that are going to be very important. If the frame's bad, just walk away. If the frame is good and the things that are wrong can be fixed, then you're going to want to listen to the motor. You're going to want to look at the doors. You're going to want to look in the engine bay. If all that stuff checks out, listen to the vehicle, drive the vehicle, and you know that 99% of that vehicle is working properly. At least for now. This is actually a truck I just bought. I paid $1,900 for it. And if I was to go out today and buy a brand new Ford extended cab four-wheel drive short bed, I would pay $45,000, $50,000 for it, which I'm not going to do. An older model pickup like this is going to cost you 4 or 5% of what a new one's going to cost, and it's going to be able to do the same kind of work. You're not going to have to worry if you scratch it up. You're not going to have to worry if it catches on fire and explodes. It's not that big of an investment, but you definitely don't want to buy somebody else's problem. So if you've been looking to change things up in your life a bit and you're looking to buy a used four-wheel drive truck, I hope that this video has been helpful to you. My name's Dave Whipple and you've been watching Bush Radical. And be radical, eh? See you soon.